Hello, this is Terrence McNally. I realized this week a bittersweet truth about having recorded these free-form conversations for 25 years is how many of my guests are no longer with us. I went back through my files and found 60. 60 human beings that I found worthy, willing, and able to share an hour with me. Here's my 2003 conversation with Robert Fuller, who crusaded against what he defined as rankism, the dismissal of society's unknowns and underachievers as nobodies, even though he himself, as a physics professor, college president, and prolific author, was clearly a somebody. Among other achievements, he entered Oberlin College as a student at 15, and though he never graduated, returned at 33 to become its president. In 2017, he thanked Donald Trump for, quote, giving rankism a face, his own scowling, mocking face, to become the poster boy for rankism and for jump-starting a dignity movement, unquote. In this conversation, we talk about his first book, Somebodies and Nobodies, Overcoming the Abuse of Rank. Robert Fuller died July 15th at the age of 88. A little warning to listeners. Though the recording starts off fine, I apologize for some audio issues that show up for several minutes towards the halfway mark. They occurred during the original radio recording. I believe it is still easy to follow the conversation. At the time, we stopped around 25 minutes in, corrected the technical problem, and the recording is clean from there to the end. Hello, I'm Terry McNally, and welcome to Freeforum. Who needs another ism? Well, today's guest, Robert Fuller, thinks we all do. That's right. He's put a spotlight on a form of injustice that he says everyone knows, and that at one time or another we all experience, but no one sees. And he calls it rankism. And he asserts that abuse based on rank and power differences is no more defensible than that based on differences in color or gender. You can see rankism, if you look, behind most of today's headlines. Enron execs take care of themselves while wiping out the savings of employees. Priests abuse children, and too many church leaders look the other way. The world's only superpower deserts its allies to attack a country already weakened by a dozen years of sanctions. And ethnic and religious groups respond to humiliations of rankism with terrorism. Here on Freeforum, we explore the lives, the work, and the ideas of individuals that I suspect hold pieces of the puzzle of a world that just might work. We look at new, innovative, and provocative models in business, environment, health, science, politics, and media, all based on the fact that I believe we can do better, and I want to find out how. The show streams weekly on the Progressive Voices Network on TuneIn.com. Podcasts are available anytime, anywhere on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Podomatic.com, most major podcast sites, and at my site, terrencemcnally.net, TERRENCEMCNALLY.net. Robert Fuller taught physics at Columbia University in New York, where he co-authored the classic text, Mathematics for Classical and Quantum Physics. He later served as president of Oberlin College. At that point, he was the youngest college president in the nation, and he led Oberlin through a series of educational reforms, many of which drew national attention. Fuller also served for many years as board chair of the nonprofit global corporation Internews, which promotes democracy and international understanding via free and independent media. Fuller has 4 children, and he lives in Berkeley, California with his wife, Claire Sheridan. Welcome, Robert, to Freeforum.
Good to be with you, Terry.
Now, my first question, as it always is on Freeforum, is about your personal path, to the work that you do today, the ideas you're pursuing. And I invite you to go back as far as you want. Childhood memories, dreams, turning points, mentors. I want listeners to know the people behind the ideas that we talk about here. And in your case, I know that your life has had some twists and turns. And so I would say take your time, and if in doing so you begin to weave in the topics of your new book, Somebodies and Nobodies, that's fair game.
You're right, Terry. We do need one more ism, and I think I first became aware of it in second grade. And I'll go all the way back to that memory. Of course, I didn't have a word for it then. I didn't have a word for it until 7 years ago. And between second grade and 7 years ago, I spent a lot of time working to overcome racism and sexism and other isms. But what I saw in second grade was one of my classmates, a poor, frail little girl who had only one dress, a faded red dress she wore every single day to school. I saw her expelled to the hall for the entire day because her fingernails were dirty. Now that was par for the course in 1940s. Teachers were quite willing to humiliate a student. And that's what was done to Arlene that day when she came in and didn't pass the fingernail test that we all began every day with. And when we went out to recess, we passed her standing there, slinking, hiding by the water fountain, leaning against the hall, trying to be invisible. We snuck glances at her, and everybody shuddered, I think, and some kids even taunted her. And for some reason, that episode affected me. I remember it always. I'm still affected by it. It can produce unexpected emotion to think about it. And I don't really know why, because there was never any real risk I would be put in the hall. My parents were big powers in that town. My father worked at Bell Labs. My mother was on the school board, that kind of volunteer woman of the 40s, and teachers treated me with kid gloves. But
they can't even see your nails when you've got kid gloves.
It's so true. That's right. But Arlene's parents were poor dirt farmers, is what they were called, because the area around Bell Labs had the very poor and the very not rich, but status, people with status, the scientists who worked there. It did not have any blacks, so there was no racism because it couldn't exist. And so I knew, without having any words for it, that what I was witnessing was not racism. Could have been seen as classism, I suppose. But what it really was someone of power exploiting that power difference to indignify, to humiliate a small person. And as I grew up, I saw this same kind of thing happening over and over again. In an all-white town, I was never tempted to see it as racism. Didn't really run into racism until I was in my teens, when I went off to college, and then you could see little examples of racism. But I went to a school that prided itself on the absence of racism, and sure enough, Oberlin College, where I was an undergraduate, had a couple dozen African Americans, which was a couple dozen more than any other white school in the country had at the time, pretty much.
And what year would that have been?
That was 52 to 55, and most white schools weren't taking blacks, or if so, one or two. When I went on to grad school at the end of Oberlin to Princeton, there were 0 blacks still on that campus in the late 50s, all the way up into the 60s. So Oberlin wasn't especially racist, probably way less so than most places. So again, everything I saw was something other than racism, and I had no name for it, but it was unmistakable that when there was a power difference, that power difference, and it was power differences are often signified by a difference in rank, and hence the word rankism, to denote this particular form of abuse, discrimination, or exploitation. You see, Arlene was a nobody in that context, and I was a somebody, even at the age of 7 in second grade. And but on the playground, I noticed that the nobody-somebody distinction kind of collapsed. When we were all out there with each other, the smart and the dumb kid distinction disappeared. And it was impossible to think of the same people who were nobodies in the classroom as nobodies on the athletic field. So I noticed there was something about the nobody-somebody distinction that was mutable and that it was also relative. I mean, you could be a somebody one day and a nobody the next day in that same school due to screwing up or something like that. So your fortunes changed. So rank is altogether more complex than race and gender, which are relatively fixed traits. Rank is not a trait. It's something you win or lose in contests for recognition. And when you win it, power or authority comes with it. And you can, if you're inclined, exploit that power advantage over people with less rank. And that is the rankism you mentioned, Terry, in your introduction when you cited the exploitation by the Enron executives of their shareholders and their employees. These are people who hold high rank in a corporate setting and who, behind closed doors in secret, arrange for their salaries and pensions to be fattened at the expense of everyone else. But just like racism, when you shine a spotlight on rankism, it makes it hard for it to persist. We've learned to shine a very bright spotlight on racism, and we've made big strides in overcoming it. Although it's still with us, I often feel that there are diminishing returns in battling it head on, and we'll make more gains against the remnants of racism by seeing it as rankism rather than as racism. And here's what I mean by that. If you talk to blacks now, they will often admit that black people treat them worse than whites do. Why is that? It's because whites don't want to be labeled racists, so they're careful around blacks to be respectful. Blacks need not be respectful around other blacks. They can indulge in their rankism without being afraid that they'll be labeled racist. The same with men and women. Women now often say that they're treated worse in the workplace by other women than they are by men, who don't want the word sexist added to their resume. Won't look good. It'll keep them from advancing. So we've done a lot to overcome racism and sexism and homophobia and ageism, but there is a great deal of abuse and discrimination left. You see it in Enron, you see it in hazing incidents, you see it in religious leaders abusing their flocks, not just Catholic, but other religions as well. You see it in corporations where there are bully bosses, if not ones who rip off salaries and pensions. They often bully subordinates, and then the subordinates look for someone to take it out on of lower rank still. Rankism is passed right down the line.
Let me ask you, because what I was asking was your path, and what you've done really is trace your path with this realization. And as you're saying that, you're saying to me that this was really something that once it stung you when you saw it happen to Arlene at the age of 7, it's something that's been a thread that you've noticed and that has affected you ever since?
I've always had this tremendous aversion to bullying, and it didn't sting me when I saw it happen to Arlene. I think I was lucky that it didn't. Had I been the victim, I think I would have been so damaged I would never have seen it. It was actually kind of lucky that I was merely a witness to it, because that enabled me to see it more clearly than if I'd been reeling under the blow of such denigration and humiliation.
Right, it's tough to witness our own.
Yeah. So,
but this is something, what I'm saying is this has been, this perception, this awareness has really been something that's been with you.
It's come up periodically. I mean, when I was about 12, there was a kid in the class named Bert who was 2 years older than the rest of us, and he'd gone through puberty and was way stronger than all the other boys, even several of them put together. So I thought, well, next time he beats up on one of us, we'll all gang up on him. We'll all jump on him absolutely at the same instant. And we can, if 10 of us jump on him, we can subdue him, I thought. So I explained all this to the kids. I even brought out the little twigs and showed how you could break one twig. You could break 2 even together, but you couldn't break 10 when they were in a bundle. And then we waited. And Bert jumped on one of us within a day or two. And I jumped on him, and one other kid did simultaneously, and the other 8 waited just a second to see how it would turn out. And that was the fatal second. And I learned from that how well you have to coordinate opposing rankism or bullying. Mm-hmm. You have to do it with the greatest of skill, or you get crushed. If you were an African American and you opposed the kind of rankism we call racism, then you were lynched.
That's right.
If you were an uppity female, you were fired back before the women's movement was there to protect you. If you're an uppity nobody today, you risk being fired. You lose your job. Unless you can get whistleblower protection. And notice who was Time Magazine's Person of the Year this year. It was the 3 women who blew the whistle on Enron and the FBI and WorldCom, I think it was. They had whistleblower protection, but most uppity nobodies don't, and they risk their job and their livelihood if they speak up without very, very carefully preparing the groundwork before attacking a bully boss.
Right. One thing I hear in that, Robert, is that we'll go into more how you've come to decide that this is worth putting a stake in the ground about, and worth making a cause, and worth pointing out even this distinction, that it has value. But I also would think that the way that you're describing it, it's to get people to come together in the early days of labor, the labor movement, in the civil rights struggles, hard enough to get people to come together around something which I think it will be much harder for people to perceive their common interest. Because I think this is what I'm saying is I think you're putting something in that you must be looking quite far ahead.
I think this movement's going to take a different form. I think you're right, Terry, that it won't be just million-man marches of nobodies. Neither was the civil rights movement at first. The women's movement is perhaps the best predictor of the way this will go. That movement began in its modern form in the 50s and 60s and consisted primarily of consciousness-raising groups of women. They weren't ready to take action or march or demonstrate or anything. Actually, they did not even have the word sexism. Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique without the word sexism. It was invented 5 years later in '68, and that led to a more activist phase of the women's movement. But prior to that, it was consciousness raising, and I see that for the dignitarian movement, the movement Nobody's Liberation. I see them talking about the ways they are abused in private, and I see somebodies talking about how being a somebody can do them damage too, because it can. Just as it harmed men to deny their feminine side, so too it harms all of us to deny our nobody side. We need that nobody side, just like we need our feminine side. Even though we want to be somebodies, we need the nobody side.
Let me ask you on that one right now. How so? I mean, it's clear to me what a male loses if they have to be staunchly, strongly, singularly male all the time. What does a somebody lose by not being a nobody?
His creativity, her creativity. It's as nobodies that we're creative and that we can make mistakes and that we're off stage. Somebodies have to be exemplary. They have to be in a leaderly role. That's what's expected of them. When I was a somebody as a college president, after a few years of it, I began to feel I was just repeating myself all the time, that I was impersonating a former self, that I was becoming a statue. I was giving the same speech over and over again to different groups. And I yearned for what I came to think of as nobody land, where I could go and be nobody and drop my persona and make mistakes and learn new things and rejuvenate myself. So after 4 years as a college president, 6 years in college administration, I quit and went to Nobody Land and re-educated myself and gave birth to another career.
Let me stop you for a second, just because, again, we're mixing the path and the concept, which I think is fun. You're the youngest college professor in the country. President,
not professor. Yeah.
President. You're making innovative changes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear you quit after 4 years. What?
Oh, that was all you could make innovative changes for. I mean, only once a century do colleges change. Otherwise, it's just absolutely incremental, minor little changes, and it's mostly fundraising. But from 1969 to 1973, there was a window of opportunity, and colleges changed more in those 4 years than in the entire century put together.
So
It was the only time it was interesting to be a college president.
So the fluke is not that you were the youngest. It's that any other time you wouldn't have wanted to be one.
No, never.
I actually started in alternative high school in '69.
Yeah.
You know?
I did too, in effect, in the late 60s, and that is what drew me into college administration.
Okay. So that makes sense then. The 4 years were the era of change was already, the backlash was already setting in.
By 73, it had set in, and no further change was going to happen at any moment. Yeah. So it was better to go to nobody land and try to come up with something else to do.
Okay. So you went to becoming a nobody. What kind of nobody were you, and what did it feel like?
Well, I'd saved up enough money as a college president to spend a few years without working much. And
so that's really a nobody.
I was really a nobody. I had no title, and I just sat at home and read for a couple of years and traveled and came up with my next project, as it were. And then I discovered when I tried to get some funding for my next project that the Somebodies in the foundation world and elsewhere wouldn't return any of my phone calls because I was a nobody. So it has a downside. And then you begin scheming, how can I get to be a somebody again? The point I'm trying to make is we need both halves of ourselves. We need recognition. Recognition is identity food. We need it just like we need meat and potatoes for our bodies. We need recognition for our souls.
Let me ask you a little bit about recognition. I have come to the conclusion, and I find myself saying, that what we most want in relationships is to be seen and to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Recognition.
Now, is that what you mean by recognition?
It is what
it's different from attention, and it's different from fame.
It's very different from beautiful. It's different from attention, and it's very different from fame. It can on occasion amount to fame, but if fame persists, it turns into some cancerous form of recognition that is bad for the recipient and results in a cult of personality, which we destroy our heroes and stars with. Princess Diana phenomenon and movie stars and so on. I think we need a redistribution of recognition in which we stop lavishing it on a few celebrities and give it to the people who contribute to our lives.
But tell me a little more how it is different from attention. In other words, what is it when you say recognition? You've chosen a word.
I'm choosing recognition to mean what you get back when you contribute. It's something that you feel is earned, and then it's acknowledged.
So
that completes the loop.
When people talk about unconditional love, the attention that someone might give another, and to see them and to hear them, might not be earned. That might just be earned by their mere existence.
Yes, and I don't think that's quite enough. I mean, it's very important. Your mother gives you that, even if you're a chainsaw murderer.
And yet you also say that dignity is the one, you say that we are not all equal in many ways.
Right.
But that dignity is all of ours. So
yeah, we're all equal in dignity. We're all wildly unequal in all our other talents, basically.
So the fact that we're equal in dignity, merely existing and being worthy of dignity, is not the same as recognition because one hasn't earned it. Is it?
I think I put it about like that.
Yeah. Okay.
We need to feel we're contributing. And when we do, we want some acknowledgement of it. And that acknowledgement is the recognition we get for our contribution. But our contribution can be anything. It can be vacuuming the rug of an office building at 2 a.m. That person who does that deserves recognition for that. That makes the working conditions better for the people who come in the daylight hours. Those people the working poor in this society get so little recognition. That's why I'm favoring a redistribution, not of money, although some of that's in order too, because
Lord
we pay
knows.
obscene salaries to the richest people. But that's not the way to go politically. The way to go is to redistribute recognition, and with it to make sure nobody's dignity is insulted. And when that happens, I think that provides an alternate path to social justice. That's a longer story. Mm-hmm. But it's a different path than the Marxist path, which would act by redistributing economic power. That turns out, it seems, to require mass murder. If you're going to redistribute money, you've got to be willing to back it up with mass murder. That cost is too high. Communism seems to have demonstrated that. So that path doesn't seem to be a viable path to social justice. It also involves tyranny in most of the examples that have been tried so far. But I think a path to social justice through equal dignity can get us there because it can solve the big problem, which is why do the working poor acquiesce in their chronic indignity? If they would cease acquiescing in their chronic indignity, if they would stand up for themselves and vote their own economic interests, a democratic means by themselves could lead to a measure of social justice.
I will share, by the way, that Los Angeles, as you may know, is one of the leaders in the country of the living wage movement.
Yes, I know.
And of the service employees labor movement. And when the janitors went on strike in this city, there's a great story told of a march down Wilshire Boulevard in which all the folks who usually have their offices cleaned by these people actually came out and cheered them. And when that happened, the strike was, they were going to win the strike. It was a moment that I think LA can be deservedly proud of.
I'll say it's a wonderful story. I hadn't heard the story, but I can believe it. I see a parade of the nobodies, and I see the people watching it realizing that they too are nobody and joining the parade because nobodies are really us. Nobodies are everybody. Everybody is a nobody. Everybody is a once and future nobody. There's a sense in which anyone can join a parade of the invisibles.
Yeah, one of the things you say, I mentioned it in my introduction, was that idea that not only is it difficult to see, but part of the reason is, as you pointed out, saying that sex, race, age are much more set, that even the somebodies have places in their lives where they're nobodies.
Yeah.
And can look forward perhaps to a time in their life
when they will be nobody in the nursing home.
Yeah.
So it behooves us to anticipating that mutability of our rank and the fact that we will have periods when we're defenseless, to establish a universal respect for dignity in the country. I think we can do that just as we've learned not to insult Black people, not to insult female people, and not to insult gay people. I think we can learn not to insult anybody.
Yeah, now that, I mean, as I've said, I think the difficulty there is that and we don't have to argue this right now, but that the use of a scapegoat, and of course in the South, it was the black.
The blacks were the scapegoat.
That the poor white farmer.
You think we need a scapegoat?
Well, I think people feel they need a scapegoat, and that the system calls for them, and the idea of giving that up and identifying with that is
that's precisely what we can do.
It's a huge flip.
We can give up our need for a scapegoat. We can do it all at once. We've gotten in practice by giving up scapegoating blacks and scapegoating women and scapegoating gays and scapegoating people with mental disabilities and other disabilities and immigrants. We're still scapegoating immigrants.
I think so.
Plenty. But we can give it all up. And if we don't give it up as a nation, we're going to get in trouble with other cultures and other peoples.
Hello, this is Terrence McNally. You're listening to my 2003 conversation with Robert Fuller about his first book, Somebodies and Nobodies, Overcoming the Abuse of Rank. Robert Fuller died July 15th at the age of 88.
I'm Terry McNally, and I'm speaking with Robert Fuller, author of Somebodies and Nobodies, and actually author of a concept, right? I mean, the book is a book, but the concept of rankism, of the abuse of rank and power, and pointing that out and shining a light on that is really something.
That's what we can give up. You see, we couldn't give it up until we had a name for it. We couldn't give up sexism until we had a name for sexism. Once they had a name for it in '68, it became possible to notice when you were perpetrating sexism. That's going to be the way we get rid of rankism, not by admonishing each other, but by watching ourselves.
Let me question it a little bit more at its very root. Aren't you open with rankism to the claim or the accusation that it's redundant, that of course power will assert itself, of course rank will assert itself by its very nature. If not,
that's okay. Asserting itself is okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with power differences or rank differences.
So what is the essence of this distinction that makes it necessary?
Abuse of power, abuse of rank is rankism. There's nothing wrong with rank, just like there's nothing wrong with color differences. There's nothing wrong with rank differences. There's nothing wrong with gender differences. Vive la différence. You don't solve racism by getting rid of the color differences. You solve it by having one color person stop abusing other color people. So too with rankism. You don't eliminate rank differences. We need them. They're part of the way we organize ourselves into effective groups, called companies, called schools. The chemistry professor knows more chemistry than the chemistry student. I want the pilot to fly the plane, not the stewardess. So rank signifies knowledge and power and authority, and rightly so, most of the time. Earned rank that signifies excellence is not the problem. The problem is the abuse of that rank, or using rank earned in one area in another area where it does not apply, as in, say, clergy sexual abuse.
Let me ask you just for a couple of quick examples before we move on to the more societal issues again. How far do you imagine, would you even see this taken in the family, for instance? In other words, and I'm going to ask this way, it looks to me like some boomer parents err on the side of losing the boundaries between childhood and adulthood. How do you remove rankism from that relationship in the right way, or to the right point?
That's a perfect example. First off, if you go back 60 years, parents still believed children were to be seen and not heard, and that's how we were raised. The boomers deserve the credit for understanding once and for all that kids are people too. And they made a historic contribution, that generation, to recognizing that kids need to be treated with respect and dignity, and that they are people too. Some of them went overboard and indulged their kids to the point that they pretended that everyone in the family had equal authority.
Right. Partly they were saying people are kids too.
People are kids too. And that's not it. You see, that's trying to get rid of rankism, which the boomers were rightly upset about, and instinctively they were against it, by getting rid of rank. That's the error that has been made over and over again, and that's the way opponents of overcoming rankism will attack it. They will pretend that, oh, you're in favor of leveling everybody's equal, everybody gets paid the same, there's no authority. Nonsense. That's ridiculous. That's like curing racism by making everyone the same color, or curing sexism by having only one gender. What a disaster. End of human race. So that's a preposterous critique.
So what do you say to a parent? Where is the point?
Well, I can't define the point. You know it when you see it. When you see these boomer parents who are indulging little Johnny and little Annie and lavishing presents on them and requiring nothing from them by way of a contribution to the family. It comes back to contributing, and every member contributing.
So in other words,
earning recognition for contributions.
What you're saying is that the child given no boundaries, and perhaps asked nothing of, cannot contribute, and thus cannot earn recognition, and will not be satisfied by that.
Will not be, and will probably grow up to be a spoiled brat and a menace, and that's a disservice. You're not exercising, as a parent, the authority you do in fact have that comes with being an older, wiser person. But
that you can invite and challenge contribution, and actually that's a gift.
That's a gift. That's what kids need to mature and become responsible adults. I mean, there's no simple formula for this, but I think the boomer generation basically made a colossal contribution to this thing, and yes, some of them have gone overboard, but it's self-correcting.
Okay. Let me ask about another area. Just what about, let's say, in the classroom and the university? Just because I don't want to get to the end of the hour without talking about that, since that's a place where you have a specific experience. And in your book, you make quite a point of it.
I think rankism is rampant in all our social institutions, but none more so than our educational institutions, our schools. I think the reason that up to half of the kids in school don't like school and hate school even is because their primary mission in school is protecting their dignity from assaults by teachers and their peers. And it's the same. I used to wonder why there were no girls in math and physics, which was my field. And, we thought they just were no good at it. We finally realized, because now there are plenty of girls in math and computers and physics and so on. There's still not 50-50, but it's now 25-75 instead of 0 to 100%, which is what it was when I was a student.
And one thing I will just throw in, because it's an interesting statistic many people probably don't know, which is that now well more than 50% of college students are women.
Yeah,
so
that too.
In the whole realm of college, they now dominate.
They do. There are more of them. But the thing about the math and physics shows, you see, how harmful a certain ism, a certain attitude can be in the classroom to discourage learning and to make people actually look stupid. Well, I think Rankism is making most students look stupid, because they will put defending their dignity ahead of learning. And if they fear they're going to screw up learning, they'll pretend they don't care about learning rather than suffer a loss of dignity by having been seen as trying and failing.
Now, do you think that, because when I think of let's say junior high and early high school, it doesn't seem to me that even if you corrected the rankism of teachers and of school administrators, that would still leave more than enough rankism among youth themselves. That
Absolutely.
There's something about
the main rankism in schools today is among the peers, not from teachers to students,
and
which it was in my example of Arlene at the beginning.
Right.
That was, but there's plenty of rankism going on among the peers, and it's with each other that they're defending their dignity. Teachers have gotten hip to the fact now that insulting kids or humiliating kids is contrary to their learning, and most of them are pretty good about it.
So you actually, I mean, now I'll ask again, in this movement or this vision that you have of a better reality, beyond rankism, you can imagine teenagers and junior high kids coming to that? Not playing dignity and status games?
Not so long as the entire society is full of dignity and indignities and status games. The kids in high school are learning it from the adult generation. They're learning it from television. Our whole society is totally rankist. It's exactly like growing up in the South in the 30s. The whole society was permeated with racism. If you weren't a racist, there was something wrong with you. If you weren't a homophobe, when I was growing up, there was something wrong with you.
You were probably a homo.
Yeah, you were accused of being a homo.
Which back then was a terrible thing to be.
A terrible thing to be.
So it was a vicious circle.
And you see, our society now is so drenched in rankism, we can hardly even see it.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I think we're a good place to, even an area of study perhaps, if one would be to look at commercials.
Yeah.
Because commercials obviously are selling the fact that you are incomplete, or else they wouldn't exist.
Right.
And one of the things I notice, because the older we get, Bob, the more I notice commercials are aimed at kids because they haven't formed all of their loyalties yet. And boy, did they use humiliation and one-upsmanship and cheating your friend.
Right.
There's a great deal of that in commercials.
That's right. Because in a rankist society, you see, you want to shield yourself from the humiliation and the indignities, and the only way that are everywhere, and the only way you can do that is by being a somebody, is by getting that thing the commercial's trying to sell you. It offers the false hope. It's like a black person who wasn't very dark and who felt they could pass as a white person back in the 30s, and some of them did it.
So nobody who buys the right beer or the right car
can feel like a somebody and has the right car. There's the classic example. It can shield you from humiliation. And that is, the commercials are predicated on that. We have a lot of unraveling to do in our society to get the rankism out of it. But we have done it with regard to racism. We haven't finished, but we've made a great start. We are doing it with regard to sexism. We can do the same thing with regard to rankism. And if we don't, the first society that does is going to produce schools that work so much better than ours that they're going to leave us in the dust.
Okay, let me tell people, you're listening to Free Forum. I'm Terry McNally, and I'm speaking with Robert Fuller, author of Somebodies and Nobodies. And we're talking about a concept that Robert really has originated, and until I saw your book, I had never heard of it, Rankism. And it'll be interesting, Robert, to look, in 5 years or so, and see whether it's become a part of the language and so on. Now, you were saying the society that overcomes it, that begins to rid itself of it, will have a better school system. What I want to pursue there is, to me, one of the arguments you make that's one of the greatest arguments of why we might move away from it, or why we should, is that it's dysfunctional and it has hidden costs. Can you talk about some of the hidden costs in different realms?
Well, there's a very interesting new book out about corporations and what makes them great, not just good, but great. And the book's title is Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he discovered it takes two things to make a great company. One, a visionary leader who demands excellence of himself and everyone in the company. And two, an eradication of rankism in the company. He doesn't use the word rankism. He uses a whole long description which amounts to getting rid of rankism, getting rid of the abuse of rank at every level, from the CEO down to the janitor. So he doesn't tolerate any of his subordinates as CEO acting in a bullying or aggressive or insulting way towards any of their subordinates. It has to be from top to bottom. This creates a loyal, enthusiastic company where everybody gets recognition for their contributions. And this actually helps the bottom line, and because his measurement of a great company is financial. It's not anything else.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, which of course we've seen elsewhere, but is that one of the problems of the university, one of the problems of the school system, and it's one that conservatives make as well, is that it doesn't have as good a way of keeping score, and that business has a very clear accountability system.
And even in business, where it is the bottom line and so measurable, even there it really pays to get rid of rankism. So I'm not moralizing in suggesting we overcome it. I'm saying, would you like to get rich? If so, get rankism out of your company. Just like you got richer when you got sexism and racism out of your company, you will get richer and have a more profitable company. We will also have schools in which fewer students get discouraged and quit and don't live up to their potential.
One of the things you said, I think, is that the spirit of an individual is, I didn't write down the quote, but it was something about that our energy and our spirit is held back by this. And it's when I guess when someone feels they can contribute and feels the recognition, that a power is released.
I think so.
And that would be true in classrooms, in colleges.
In all of our social institutions, from the church to the family that we've talked about, and in healthcare, where there's a revolution going on. It used to be that the doctor was an M-deity. And he gave orders, which you docilely followed as the patient. Now, more and more, we're treating our doctors as partners in the health business and in healing ourselves. And
that would be a nicer story if the pitfall wasn't that both the doctor and the patient are now subservient to the HMO person. And so I have a feeling that's a phase that we will get out of, because it has proven it doesn't work quicker than people thought it would.
Exactly right. It's a rankist metastructure. But there's a lot of progress being made at the patient doctor
that they are
level.
Partners.
They're more partners, and patients are way better informed thanks to support groups and the internet and good books on all these ailments.
Yeah.
And so we're getting the rankism out of the healthcare business.
Let me ask even another one that I think some of my listeners will probably relate to, which is that I've been involved, and I'll bet you have too, with a lot of causes that are attempting to do positive change, that are attempting to create a better organization or a better society even, where rankism still permeates. In other words, within folks who feel that they're trying to improve things, that actually there's a rankism. I'll even say this. I've noticed that when money isn't a question, often power and rank becomes more the currency, and you see even more of the petty politics.
I agree. I think progressives are guiltier than most other political persuasions of rankism in the ranks of their organizations. It's all they've got to pride themselves on is their rank, and they often slip into abusing it and lording it over volunteers in those organizations. And furthermore, they think, you see, they have a righteousness because they think they have the truth, and that justifies an abuse of rank. It does not. It does not justify it.
And you also point out that a righteous attempt to fight rankism, while being ludicrous, will also fail.
It fails because you can't eradicate rankism with rankism. You see, you can eradicate sexism with rankism. That is to say, you can suppress it. That's what the women did when they ridiculed men as male chauvinist pigs who were sexist. They humiliated men and made them repress their sexism. So it looked like a gain. The men were less sexist, but women were using rankism to reduce the sexism. All it really does is drive it underground, and the men wait for a chance to get even later. So you can never eradicate rankism with rankism, which is one of the hardest things about getting rid of it. We have nowhere to go to get rid of it. There's nothing we can inveigh. If we get very moral and start moralizing, we're just pulling moral rank, and that's a form of rankism. So the only ways to get rid of it, and people always ask, well, what can be done about this? And I say, well, we take a page from the women's movement. We tell people how it makes us feel when we're victims of rankism.
And in this case, I think the thing you have going for it is that we've all felt it.
All
somebodies have been nobodies just because they were children once.
That's right. We've all been nobodied, and we all fear that it'll happen to us again. So people can really own up to their dislike of it, and now, they can catch it in themselves.
Bob, someone could say
yeah,
that because we've all been it is actually one of the things that fuels
it does.
The abuse.
It does fuel it. That's one way we...
Those who have been abused tend to abuse.
As in domestic violence. Very often the husbands who engage in domestic abuse were victims of it themselves. This is something we can, however, witness about human nature and human dynamics, and having witnessed it and understood it, we can overcome it.
Okay. So I think I'm getting that you said it once, and you keep coming back to it, that it's going to take, it's interesting, recognition, you say, is what people want. This is going to take recognition of rankism.
Yes.
It's going to have to be seen. And I think you're talking about individual learning to see it.
In themselves.
And then consciousness raising and so on. Let me jump to a question. If you were to look 10 or 20 years in the future, do you think we've turned this around? And if so, tell me some of the things that happened. I'm asking you to do a little science fiction here. What were some of the things that happened along the way?
Well, that's really a hard one. I think there will be a Rosa Parks-like incident. There will be a Bull Connor-like incident. There will be, but it's impossible to predict them in advance. But there will be moments. The whistleblowers on the cover of Time magazine was a moment where we suddenly saw that uppity nobodies can prevail over corporate abuse, over bureaucratic rankism. We can make headway against it. I don't know what the great illuminating examples will be. I think it will rather consist of many small individual actions of people saying to their bully boss, when you spoke to me like that, I felt bad. And just letting it go like that and letting the boss think that over. Because you're not attacking him, you're just reporting how you felt.
It's so hard to do.
It's hard to do.
Just in our own relationships.
I know.
It's so hard to do.
It's very hard to do, but I think we can learn to do it. I think we needed the word rankism to have a name for what it was we don't like, have a name for the sense of indignity we get when someone assaults our dignity.
Now, do you think, dignity is not a word that's used a lot, I don't think, nowadays. You can go a week without hearing that word. Now, is it central to what we're talking about here?
It is, because rankism has precisely that effect on a person. It feels like an indignity. And dignity is non-negotiable with people. They may not let on that their dignity's been hurt. They'll keep, but they feel it inside, and they wait for a chance to get even. So precisely what gives us that feeling of indignity is when someone has abused their rank. It's not their having the rank. I don't mind losing the 400 meters to someone who can outrun me. I mind tremendously if the referee has cheated, or he got a head start, or he took drugs, or in some way he cheated. That's what bothers me, not being beaten. It's not people who are better than us that bothers us. It's because we admire excellence. It's when it's been done falsely, or when they parlay their betterness in one realm to get favors in another realm. That's when we object.
That's right.
And that's what rankism is.
When they use the power in one realm to use it in another, or when they use the power to perpetuate the power.
Perfect. As in tenure. Tenure is an example of that. You get it when you're 30 in an academic institution, and it seems to me it ought to be repeatedly earned every 5 years or so. It shouldn't be a lifetime grant of high rank.
Do you think as I was reading this, I thought a libertarian, a follower of Ayn Rand and so on, they would probably resonate to this particular...
Those kind of people often tout the importance of rank, and they tend to overlook its abuses. The right tends to celebrate rank and overlook abuses of rank.
But
the left tends to focus on...
But I'm separating the libertarian from other kinds of,
conservatives.
Of conservatives. The libertarian, they, if you press them, will say meritocracy is one of their ideals.
Yeah,
and so I think there's potential there for strange bedfellows.
Absolutely, but I don't know what all else they believe. But we don't have a meritocracy in the United States. We have more of a meritocracy than most other societies, but we are far from a perfect meritocracy. And rankism is the single biggest hurdle left to overcome to get to a true meritocracy.
We've got about 3.5 minutes. What about on the national and the international? Give a couple of thoughts about this administration, this foreign policy, terrorism.
Well, nothing breeds terrorism like a dignity gap, like a sense in a people that their dignity has been insulted. That's what led to the terrorism of Hitlerism and Nazism, which was a form of international terrorism, the systematic humiliation of the whole German people in the Versailles Treaty. So it behooves us to be very careful to respect the dignity of other peoples. This does not automatically mean not making war against them, however, because there are situations, such as in Cambodia, where the Vietnamese invaded Cambodia and put an end to that genocide. And that was a cross-boundary pulling of rank by a larger Vietnamese army to stop a horror. The Tanzanians did the same thing with Uganda to stop that genocide, and we should have done it in Rwanda, and we didn't do anything. We had the power with 1,000 troops to stop a genocide of 1 million Tutsis. We did nothing. In Bosnia, we did finally enter that situation, and in Kosovo, we stopped the genocide against a Muslim people. So it doesn't automatically follow that you don't use your rank. Rank isn't the problem. It's abuse of rank that's the problem. You've got to look at each situation, such as Iraq, and ask, is this a proper use of rank to stop the terror and the horror of that tyranny, or is it an improper use of rank? And if you decide it was proper, then you've got to ask yourself 2 months later, is it still proper? Right. And are you following it up? And are you delivering on your promise or not? So it's a complex situation.
And I would guess that in that one, and you mentioned it in the book, is that it's not enough just to use force.
Not at all.
That to restore dignity is going to come from a Marshall Plan.
Absolutely.
And I think you say at one point, opportunity You had a line about opportunity that
There are millions of young people there with wasted lives. We have to adjust our international policy so their lives aren't wasted. That means giving them economic opportunity. It means a metaphorical equivalent of the Marshall Plan, not necessarily the exact same recipe we used after World War II, but some contemporary version of helping the people onto their feet if we have used force to end a tyranny in some situation, as we did in World War II and as the Vietnamese did in Cambodia.
Yeah, it strikes me that it is a cornered animal that uses that to me that's a metaphor for a terrorist. It's they see everything so weighted against them that they have to do this, and if our policy were to offer and restore dignity and opportunity, terrorists would become pariahs.
To the sympathizers of the terrorists.
That's right.
There might still be some people who are using terrorism for their own purposes of regaining control.
But they would be the pariahs.
But they would be the pariahs. Hitler never would have been elected if we had not humiliated the whole German people.
Okay, we've come to the end of the hour. Thank you, Robert Fuller, and thank you, listeners. You can learn more about Robert's work and Somebodies and Nobodies at www.breakingranks.net. Robert Fuller, thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
The following is an obituary written by his family in the July 22nd issue of his local Berkeley, California paper, Berkeley Side, edited a bit for length. Robert Works Fuller, a physicist, academic leader, author, global humanitarian, and founding voice of the modern dignity movement, died on July 15th in Berkeley. He was born October 26, 1936, in Summit, New Jersey. Bob spent a lifetime integrating expertise in physics, education, diplomacy, social justice, and the arts to challenge conventional wisdom and bring about social and political change. Bob entered Oberlin College at age 15 on a Ford Fellowship and graduate school at Princeton University at age 18 in physics. After additional study at the After additional study at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris and the University of Chicago, he returned to Princeton to work with the renowned theoretical physicist John Wheeler, co-authoring with him a foundational paper on wormholes. Bob received his Ph.D. in physics in 1961. In the early 60s, Bob taught physics and mathematics at Columbia University in New York as well as at Barnard and Wesleyan. During this time, he co-authored with Fred Byron the book Mathematics of Classical and Quantum Physics. It's still in print and used today. In 1967, Bob's attention was drawn towards the civil rights movement and educational reform. He developed a course for inner-city high school dropouts in Seattle to show them that they could indeed learn and be successful students. The project led to a new career in educational reform as the Dean of Faculty at Trinity College. In 1970, at age 33, Bob returned to become president of Oberlin College. At Oberlin, Fuller spearheaded sweeping reforms, inaugurating a commission on the status of women, tripling the enrollment of minority students, expanding co-ed dormitories, and hiring African-American head coaches, including Tommy Smith, the Olympic gold medal sprinter. He supported the students' anti-war demonstrations and feminist and gay liberation movements. Under his leadership, Oberlin also reformed its curriculum, eliminated distribution requirements, and incorporated student representation into the decision-making structure of the college. It was a turbulent time in America, and Bob's leadership at Oberlin made national news, from Life magazine and the Wall Street Journal to an ABC sports special with Howard Cosell. While these reforms were in the spirit of the times, they were sometimes controversial, and he resigned in 1974. During the 1970s, Bob traveled to Vietnam to get a first-hand view of the conflict. He also visited India, and after witnessing the famine in Calcutta, he mounted a campaign to address world hunger, partnering with singer John Denver in that effort. In 1977, the two met with President Carter and Vice President Mondale at the White House, and that meeting in the Oval Office led to the creation of the Presidential Commission on World Hunger. For the next decade, it was the nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union that consumed Bob's energy. Knowing the science behind the making of nuclear weapons, he became active as a writer, citizen diplomat, and public speaker about arms control. In the 1980s, he made frequent trips to the USSR as chairman of Internews, an organization devoted to fostering independent media in emerging democracies. Internews created so-called space bridges linking American and Soviet audiences via two-way live television that explored a range of political issues with the goal of de-stereotyping the Cold War antagonists to each other. During this time, Fuller also worked on other projects dealing with conflict resolution and economic development, traveling to Ireland, Israel, Palestine, Kenya, South Africa, and throughout South Asia and South America. In 1992, Bob worked in Somalia to help bring images of the devastating famine to the attention of the United Nations. With the collapse of the USSR, Bob's work as a citizen diplomat came to a close, and he began reflecting on his career. His years of crossing social hierarchies from esteemed academic to grassroots activist led him to coin the term Rankism, the systemic abuse of power inherent in social ranking, and its antidote, dignity for all. He authored several influential works, including Somebodies and Nobodies, All Rise, and Dignity for All, and became a leading voice in a global dignity movement that reached universities, corporate boardrooms, and national policymakers. In his 80s, Bob turned his attention to art and music. He loved playing Schubert on the piano and experimenting with color and shapes in his paintings at his Berkeley art studio. Days before Bob's death, his written short story was published in the Princeton Alumni Magazine, integrating concepts from physics to social justice in an imaginary conversation through wormholes with John Wheeler. Bob's legacy lies not only in his scientific and institutional achievements, but in his enduring vision of a more equitable and dignified world, one where power respects all persons. For more information on Bob's work, please refer to his website, Robert Works Fuller, all one word. Robert, and then the word Works, W-O-R-K-S, and then Fuller, all one word, robertworksfuller.com. For this conversation and many other interviews and articles, to join me in pursuit of a world that just might work, go to terrencemcnally.net, TERRENCEMCNALLY, all one word, terrencemcnally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com. They're the same website. If you want to receive my weekly email announcement telling you who's going to be on, what we're going to talk about, and usually 10 articles that'll flesh out the conversation, email me at temcnally@mac.com, TEMCNALLY@mac.com. You can also subscribe and listen to the Freeform podcast on most of those podcast sites and at my site. You can find years of podcasts at those sites and mine. Listen anytime, anywhere. Michael Lewis, Naomi Klein, Bill McKibben, Van Jones, Connie Rice, Greg Boyle, George Packer. Thanks to Kiana Williams in production, George Vasilopoulos of Progressive Voices, and most of all to you, my listeners. Please share this podcast widely.